All right, looks like we got a good quorum for the first topic at least. Uh, let's get started. So this is welcome to the CDM for March 2021. I start off with Kyle Bayard here. I'm going to talk about ways to make Ceph easier to use out of the box. Oh, you got the pad already. Thanks.
Oh, like almost the same time. So, I guess kind of the primer for this was, and I discussed this a little bit at the Performance Weekly a couple of weeks back, was we did a bunch of like testing and optimization around RGW that kind of went through, that transcended the whole stack. And we really wanted to make some of the configuration type stuff that we did to get that really good performance more accessible to people that are using Ceph. And so as I kind of mulled over it, I started to have this idea of having almost like a pre-canned set of erasure coded, EC profiles. So we already have EC profiles are a thing on Rados. And so it would be kind of like we would just, have a set that already exists in clusters when they start up. And then they could just have pools use those profiles instead of having to specify, their own profiles. And then building on that, that we could potentially have Rados clients do something in terms of having different kind of like profiles of parameters, almost like how we currently have for different storage classes. So in some cases, like we have, like a setting for, like a generic setting, and then we have an HDD or an SSD setting. But almost a way to have like a profile of settings that would be applicable to particular pools. That would kind of like be almost building on top of that. So you could kind of have like bundles of configurations so that I could have like a set of settings for RGW that RGW would use for pools that are using a particular erasure coding profile. And so that, because a lot of these things there's like alignment that you want to like achieve as you move through the Rados client down to Rados. And the erasure coding. So, you kind of want to align things like chunk and stripe and so on and so forth sizes. And, I could pull up some diagrams that talk about the different chunk and stripe and window sizes that are up at the RGW layer, and then the different kind of ways that we chop up data for erasure coding. But there's kind of like, instead of it being like, if people go and try to adjust the defaults, they really have to have a pretty deep understanding of multiple layers of the stack to do it successfully. And so this would kind of help, I think, have kind of like some pre-canned profiles. And then going further, potentially having some sort of blue store hints or PG attributes based on the pool, so that you could also have like different properties for blue store down at the lowest level. So you can probably have blue store optimized for particular pools around, the way that it does checksumming or the blob sizes that it allocates. So yeah, that's kind of the premise of kind of what I tried to capture in the Etherpad, but I'd be kind of interested in kind of open discussion around that kind of idea.
Yes, maybe we can talk about the first thing, the EC profiles first.
Mm-hmm.
I guess how much do these depend on like the use case? Like the stripe unit, for example, it seems like it could potentially vary a bit if you have like a wider range of object sizes. You don't want to be like have a bunch of extra padding added when you have small objects.
Right. So one of the downsides of having more aggressive stripe units is that with the way that our EC currently works is you pad up to the stripe width. And so you potentially have space and IO amplification if you have, like, I think our default stripe unit is something on the order of 4K. So, perhaps the values that I have in here are maybe not great for like a general setting, but I think that there are probably like pre-canned profiles that we could put in there that would be sensible for different use cases. And having the ability to have the cluster start up with some sort of reasonable set of erasure code profiles seems like they could be defined, I guess, somehow. But it seems like it could be useful. And what the exact values you set for the stripe unit and the K and M, or probably, we'll have to have a discussion around that. But the general idea of being able to have them, I think, is useful, notwithstanding.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to have those available in general, since you have these kind of very common configurations that people use. You don't want to force them to recreate those themselves each time and install Ceph.
Yeah, and I think we could build, like, even if we started with something, right, we could build on that as we do benchmarking and discover that certain ones resonate well with certain workloads or something.
Seems like we need some sort of matrix, right? I mean, like we do have applications, like currently pools have applications that you can enable. Now it goes down to the level of, like, if you are running an RGW application, what kind of matrix is available to you? What kind of workload are you running? So we need to kind of define high level things. Like, if we know, or some user knows that their objects are going to be really small, which profile they should be using. So we need to come up with those broad categories in general, what I think.
I wonder if RGW could kind of make some of that automatic too, like by using different pools or for different sizes of objects, or packing things together more to create larger radius objects.
Yeah, I mean that's like object packing, I think, into is something that we've had discussions about too.
That's been coming up in the roadmap considerably in the last 3 weeks. I think we're going to revisit this, but it's not necessarily hotter than other things. There are some areas I don't want to kind of go into here, but I think RGW can steer this to appropriate resources. But from like the radius level below, what is the right smorgasbord of options to give the application like RGW that when it knows what strategies to pursue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess kind of the idea of starting with the erasure code profile was kind of because it was already a thing, and it seemed like it was probably the lightest weight thing to add, like preload some, influenced by sort of testing that we see people talking about, like performance weeklies and various teams and stuff.
Yeah, those ones definitely seem very clear in terms of like what commonly used kind of K and M values are. I think there's not a whole lot of argument about those. I guess what I'm maybe less clear on would be the different kinds of like optimizations you want to make for different sorts of applications. Is it purely about these like object sizes and RGW aligning the object sizes with the underlying radius object sizes?
That's kind of what I'm thinking, right? Is you would have some set of pre-canned K, like I think the most important thing is to have some set of profiles that have different like K and M factors, and then have those influence RGW settings as opposed to just kind of having RGW settings that are relatively static, and then perhaps not being aligned well depending on what somebody sets for in their erasure code profile for the data pool. So that's kind of
I haven't worked with these in a while, but the impression I've always gotten is that we don't have a lot of guardrails on making sure that any of the stripe widths and those factors align with the object sizes people use by default. And so it's easy to set them up so that RGW is sending out 4 megabyte writes and they just are like stopping in the middle of a stripe unit or of a stripe.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I was like pointing out to some, or when I was looking at this, was that if somebody doesn't have a K value that's divisible by 4, they end up with a weird EC chunk, right? And that may be
and that's just because everything's like usually 4 megabytes, or
well, no, like if you have
like
if your RGW is striping on a 4 megabyte boundary and your K is set to 6, then you're dividing 4 megabyte by 6, and that's going to be weird. Like it's not going to be aligned to anything. And so
why is 4 special here? Is 4 megabytes a particularly common write size?
It's just because everything is 4 megabytes unless you configure otherwise.
The default striping boundary for Rados objects in Ceph object in Cephfs and with RBD is all 4 megabyte.
Those two, yes, but RGW gets to do it on a per object basis. My question is, why doesn't RGW simply adapt?
Yes, but it doesn't.
We can do we can do a lot of things, but we learned to do that because Rados like to do that.
I get it. But what I'm pointing out,
but you're right. You're absolutely right. There's a whole dimension or dimensions along this axis we should pursue.
Well, I simply mean that we choose K values based on our durability goals. That's more difficult to move mountain than stripe boundaries. So yes, I would adapt it the other direction.
So I think we're on the same page, right? What I'm saying
is there nothing you want to do there? Because I mean, this was extreme. This bandwidth workload that Kyle was working on for POC was extreme, but everything depended on getting every piece aligned in the stack, and 4 meg was like a magic number for it. How much were we able to get in the future how much we care?
But yeah,
wait, did 4 megabyte come from the workload or from
4 megabyte going all the way down through the stack, right? So, and that meant that the Blue Store was doing 4 megabyte IOs, and like the memory allocations were such that it actually ended up with as a single BIO when it was issued down to the block, like raw block device, and we got that with like some tweaks to Blue Store and stuff like that, and we saw really good performance. But to make that more accessible, and I think I'm in complete agreement with you, Sam. Is that I guess we could just inspect the K value and then dynamically adjust the various chunk window blah 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 sizes in the RGW. But I guess I was thinking of doing that by proxy, where you have some sort of pre-canned profiles, and if you had the pre-canned profile, there would also be some sort of pre-canned RGW parameter bundle that you could specify, and then also have some sort of like hinting or PG annotation, so that when Blue Store was doing allocations for that particular pool, that it could use perhaps different settings than it would use for other pools, because that one pool is going to have immutable objects, and because it's RGW or whatever. They're always going to be because J erasure is going to zero pad the EC stripe, that the IO the size of the thing that's going to go down to Blue Store is going to be consistently sized, and so you can basically just have like a fixed allocation for buffers and for space allocations from the block device.
So for the hints for aspects, we already have this Rados hint for immutable. That this object is going to be immutable. We have this concept of like setting other kinds of flags along with it. I wonder if we could just use those existing flags and to apply this kind of tuning, like aligning things to the size of that, right?
I think so. I actually think that gets us most of the way there. I think the only maybe remaining thing is that we need some sort of size hint or annotation on the PG, so that we know what we expect the IOs going down to Blue Store to be, so that we could allocate we can size
Yeah, I think that exists.
the buffers and the allocations from the actual block device in almost like fixed size chunks for that particular pool. Even though it might not be like that might be a completely unreasonable strategy generally, but for that particular pool, it may be completely sensible and beneficial.
Yeah, I guess the only aspect I'm uncertain about there is like the behavior where if you have like different pools with different kinds of sizing requirements. I'm mixing with this one pool that has like very strict immutable objects of all uniform size. You end up with different sorts of like disk fragmentation patterns. So yeah, like best effort could certainly be possible.
Like best effort, give me contiguous 4 megabyte allocations. And
well, if they use it correctly, right? If the stream of IOs to that pool has a lot of good put, then fragmentation by definition minimized, right?
Well, no, but you could have a single block device that is having has objects that correspond to PGs in different pools. So like even though one pool is all kind of fixed size chunks and very reasonable.
Oh yeah. It has to be steered from higher level.
The block device allocations could be screwed up by a block storage pool or something.
No, I don't think it does have to be steered from a higher level. That's a pretty standard allocator trick. Like if you know you have a workload with a large number of fixed allocations and other variable ones, you just allocate in different areas.
Okay.
It's hard, admittedly.
Cool.
But
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
It's probably worth discussing this more with Igor and Adam, Bluestore developers.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the existing allocation strategies in Bluestore, we handle this kind of thing. But the basic infrastructure is there.
I guess at the Rados application side, right? Like I was, like we could just make RGW smarter and either look at EC profiles by name and have some pre-canned ones, or we could have them actually look into the actual settings that are set within the EC profile and try to do something smart there using some sort of heuristic or algorithm or something. But I think it could potentially be more generally useful than just RGW, where you have some package of parameters that you want to set on a per pool basis or per application basis somehow, and maybe it's similar things like the striping configuration for Ceph or RBD or whatever, but I wouldn't want to limit ourselves like it seems to me more generally useful than that, and we might not be able to consider all of the different parameters that might be useful. So if we had the ability to create like profiles of like Ceph.conf parameters that get applied to particular pools based on some sort of something, whether it be an EC profile or I don't know, whatever.
This is very similar to the concept we. Go for it, Brett.
And so, honestly, I just start with taking the profiles you've identified as being good and like putting them as default options in the dashboard for when you create an RGW and associated pools, because we do have those wizard things already.
Well, but that's so. But you can't have one set of defaults, right? Because you might have multiple data pools that are associated with different placement targets in RGW that are associated with different S3 storage policies.
Yeah, so I mean you can have but you're talking about like per pool or per cluster, right? Or are you trying to do the like S3 placement language thing?
In particular, if as Sam says, there's a lot that there are different extent classes that could be optimized within the same storage region or whatever, OSD, PPG. That's fine. Just make them visible.
That doesn't exist yet. I'm saying that if you just you can set up an allocation heuristic so that you don't tend to get fragmentation like that.
Well, no, I respect what you're saying. I'm just saying if we have a way of saying, I mean, what Greg is saying is sensible too. We make it visible, but it sounds like if we have several choices, teach us how to work to the middle. If the OSD knows how to do various things, we know, and we know it. Like this workload was crazy. I mean, the idea was that, and it's not bad, but it was like a maximum bandwidth workload, maximum effort bandwidth. Nothing else matters. Everything is 4 meg aligned, reads, writes. But because of that, they expect to get 15% optimality within, right? Within 50% of optimal.
Yeah, I'm just like,
but we got pretty close. We got within like 2% of that. So because of the, that's all this teaches us. But it's cool. It doesn't teach us how to give a general purpose environment but that's where things get more interesting. But if we want to capture this, then what should we do?
I think going back to Kyle's point, we've done something very similar for our DM clock profiles. We have something called config set. It's not applied on a pool basis, but it's like a setting. What we do is that we want to optimize for client IO, and the user just sets that. And we have a bunch of Cephconf settings, which were earlier separate settings. Under the hood, they get set automatically based on whatever performance testing we're doing, and whatever we think should come with that profile. So it's almost going to be similar. I mean, it's just the concept of application already exists. We extend that under the hood to say, okay, this application optimizes for X, Y, Z. Similar things. Under the hood, we need to set those stripe sizes, stripe widths, whatever we want to do, even in BlueStore.
Yeah. So I mean, there's lots of heuristics we could apply, but it sounds like we've identified at least one really good set for a particular workload. We have a good idea what they look like for like mixed and smaller workloads. So you just say like, look, here are 3 descriptors for possible RGW IO patterns. Pick the one that's closest, and then like we set it up when you create that pool. And that's like,
well, right now,
that'll
just
needs to get tied together.
I think we're mixing 3 different conversations. The first is, where do these settings live? That's interesting, but I think not critical. The obvious place to put it, if we don't want to do anything invasive, is to add it as an interface in the dashboard that just knows how to talk about the relevant components. So I claim that part's trivially solvable. The next piece is, sorry, okay. Why?
Oh, I mean, I guess for like a preloaded EC profile or something. But
no, that's not true. The dashboard knows how to knows how to spin up and unspin up RGWs. It knows how to create and remove pools, including all relevant parameters, and it knows how to set configs on OSDs. Any knob that can be turned anywhere.
The current parameters in RGW are not per pool; they're per RGW. So if you have multiple pools that you want different profiles,
I mean, okay, so yes, that would require a change to RGW.
Yeah.
So, which is my second piece. The second piece is there are parameters that we don't currently have places to add knobs for. One of them is that RGW needs differential per pool configs, perhaps. Another is that BlueStore may need a differential per pool configs. Those can either be accomplished through the existing hints or through some pool parameter. Doesn't matter. The third thing is what defaults are actually worth presenting to people. And how do we deal with situations like this that are truly exceptional? So if you attack them separately, the last case, I think, is you present defaults that are sane for real workloads that really happen, with an escape hatch for an arbitrary YAML that describes all of the relevant knobs that you can then distribute if you need to do something clever.
So would the ability to have per pool parameter bundles of key value pairs in terms of like RGW get object max rec size?
That's part one.
Like, would that not be useful for Cephfs or RBD? It seems like it would.
No, because they're specific to RGW for part of that. It's irrelevant.
Well, no, those particular keys wouldn't be useful, but I can see other keys being useful.
The IO patterns of RBD in particular and Ceph some are wildly different from what RGW
Hang on, that's not what he's saying.
And there's way less EC.
That's not what he's saying. So that talks about case one, which is where do we store it. If you really want to, yeah, you can put it in the OSD map, if that makes you happy. But it doesn't actually matter. All that matters is that you have a common config language that knows how to touch the relevant pieces for the config set. I don't think it's actually important how you do it.
Right. I guess the part that I'm stressing on is I don't want, I think it would be useful to not have whatever logic or heuristics be buried inside of RGW and RBD and Cephfs, but have a more general ability for an operator to be able to specify an arbitrary bundle of...
Yes, that would be at the dashboard, correct.
Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah. So
I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. The point is that someone creates a YAML or selects from a set of available defaults, and it touches all the things that need to be touched
okay.
via whatever mechanism.
Yeah.
So I think
So
that's the main thing
they'll
you're
need to
concerned.
be. Yeah. So that'll need to be defined or whatever, and then the the various RBD, RGW, CephFS will have to be able to respect that, or how does that work?
Yes, they will need to actually implement the things that need to be implemented
Yeah.
internally,
And
all the way
I
through
would
the
start with
stack.
RGW, and then
But that's the part that's
an
going to
RBD
take a
adapt
lot
it as
more
they
time.
needed to.
Simply defining the key
But,
value pairs isn't really isn't
but
appropriate.
like you can present. Yeah, I mean most of what you're describing sounds like either it's just defining the basic setups that we want to offer, like the three or whatever, and then getting RGW to respect the fact that there might be more than one of them being accessed at a time. And that'll require RGW modifications with like code. But if like the people deploying this mostly only have one thing that they're deploying inside of a cluster, and I have no idea how much mixed workloads are common or not, like you can start off by just encoding the basic knowledge you've gotten here.
Mixed workloads are the default. This was pretty special.
Yeah. But I
But
mean,
it might not be crazy. I mean, you can imagine various reasons, but like this was like a cache, a vast intermediate cache that believes it can schedule out all of its IOs.
But even just like the make sure that K and M actually align with the object size, like I don't think we even do that yet, and that's easy to plug into the system for basically anything, right? So
that's the low
or at
hanging
least for
fruit.
defaults.
Right?
So I would start by grabbing the low hanging fruit and like getting it into and getting that in the dashboard, and then figuring out with RGW what kinds of configs it needs to do the other stuff you talked about in terms of adapting from the K&M profiles. Because there are a few different ways that could happen, and I think whichever one RGW wants is probably going to be the solution that Ceph wants, but Ceph will have a much easier time adapting to it because we already do a bunch of stuff per file that RGW doesn't. Because like files can have variable layouts already in Ceph and stuff like that. That's all plumbed through the stack already. And I don't know about RBD.
RGW has layouts, but they're kind of crappy.
Yeah, and RBD has like supports CC, but it's just maybe I'm wrong, but I get the impression that it's so much less interesting because no one who cares about their performance is ever going to use it. So I wouldn't fuss about that one too much.
Yeah, I do see it as very the things that are relevant for RGW here. Generally would probably be useful for CephFS where you have different directories that map to different data pools or something, and you might want different parameter bundles for them. But maybe I'm.
Yeah, I think the concept of parameter bubbles makes sense for any kind of interface, but the individual parameters that we want to change may be different for each one, and they need to be interpreted by each component differently.
And like I said, like CephFS already supports a whole bunch of that. I think the only thing that would be weird is that I think we have global read ahead and write ahead values, but like we already support randomly sized objects with random striping boundaries on a per file basis and all that. So
in CephFS where you just like specify.
Yeah, in CephFS. Yeah, because you just shove it, like stick it in an X adder on the file, and then it accepts it.
I guess the only thing I can immediately think of for RBD would be like RBD cache, right? Like if you want to set RBD cache, like setting RBD cache to true on Flash, all Flash pools kind of sucks. So and if you have a cluster that has Flash pools and disk-based pools, you if you have to set RBD cache equal to true or false, right? You probably want different settings depending on the RBD, and maybe you can. Like you can have something like Cinder or whatever, whatever's doing the kubevert thing, like try to get that right. But it seems like we could just make it so that we don't, whatever new control plane thing comes along, we don't have to like make sure that they do it right. Like, I guess that kind of gets populated by the RBD and the KVM for AO settings and stuff.
Yeah, Jason probably has a good idea of like different kinds of parameters that we want to tune differently for different sorts of use cases.
Yeah.
I'm arriving a little bit late, but I'm wondering, have we already sort of mapped out what the different profiles would actually be?
Not completely. I think we've kind of agreed that they would be useful, and that probably we'll have an idea of a few that will be reasonable based on common. Like right here, I have the 4283, right, which is at least in the case of with default 4 megabyte things, 4 megabyte striping for a lot of things makes sense, right? You want the K to be a multiple of 4. And then, if we had other K values that weren't multiples of 4, then once we had the other things like some sort of, per pool set of chunking and striping parameters, then we could, detect those and set them or something. I don't know. Like right now, like just starting right off the bat, we probably wouldn't want to start by loading a 4.2, a 6.2, and an 8.3, because if people just used a 6.2 with the existing other defaults, that would be not good, right? Because it wouldn't be aligned. It would be 4 megabyte divided by 6. That would.
I mean, it seems like there's the part where if there's a pool that has a given EC profile, then there are certain ways that RGW or CephFS could just constrain the striping behaviors that it considers, I guess, based on that. Like it's always going to be a multiple of like, I guess, the stripe.
Yeah.
Not the stripe unit, but the stripe length.
Stripe width.
Stripe width, I guess, but it's unclear necessarily whether you want to have multiple stripes in the same object, like how big the object should be. So
right. And we did kind of like in my testing or whatever, right, we did a dumb stripe setting where it was like one big stripe.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's like generally the thing that people want, right? Because of
right. I mean, that would make sense if you have like if you know it's a big object, then having like nice big stripe units makes sense. But if it's a small object, it's like a horrible choice.
Well, I think we also want to eliminate the overhead from having an unused stripe.
Yeah, right. So like even if you have big objects, but you set your stripe width as like in my test, I set the stripe width to 24, right, megs, and that was big. But that meant if someone writes 25 megs, then there's space amp up to 48 megs, which is not good.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking in most cases we like lately, and probably a lot of the benefit that I saw was probably not so much from playing with the stripe stuff, but more about getting K aligned with the various chunking and striping parameters in RGW, right?
Yeah.
So that seems like the big win, not the playing with the stripe stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it the case that you really want like a dynamic behavior in RGW so that if it's a small object, it goes into one pool, and if it's a large object, it goes into a different pool?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, like doing that or doing some kind of having RGW place things differently or depending on their size in general.
Yeah.
Or,
I don't think it's something that
multiple
it does right now,
RGW objects into a single Rados object.
I mean, if you do a put, does RGW know how big it's going to be up front?
It does not.
Actually, I think it does, or it believes it does.
Like sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, I guess.
But it has content length, so it knows what it expects. But it's also multi-part. I mean, I know, but RGW has manifest, right? So RGW has all the layout concept, although it's not layout language better. But that means we can invent a variety of things.
Like you could imagine the manifest, the main data pool being like, replicated, 3x replicated, and with like reasonable settings or whatever, but then having all these EC pools that are optimized for like very large objects or like medium objects. And then based on the content length, you just choose where it's going to go.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the plans that I think we've had for a long time, but we've seen them more in view now. Dedupe and packing.
So in the
packing helps too with small objects in more intelligent ways.
So in the case of multi-part upload, you would just look at the sum of all the parts, and then steer the aggregate object towards the right pool or something.
Or each part. I mean, wouldn't each part just be its own separate thing? Like if a part is small,
it is. Each part has its own array of stride of stripe set.
Yeah. So a small part would go in the 3x replicated pool, and a very large part EC pool.
Are there small parts? I thought there was all the kind of uniformly sized parts. Maybe I don't understand the protocol.
I mean, normally, but the last one. I guess,
the last one might be different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we stop them from doing, but you're right. They pick a stride.
Yeah. Normally they're all the same. In principle, you could do whatever you want.
There's always there's the last one, but I mean it's still worth thinking about.
I think like the default for like the S3A file system client will be to, if the object being written is larger than 64 megs, then it will use multi-part, and by default it'll use 32 megabyte parts. So it'll write out a full 32 meg part, and then the last part could potentially be fractional, right? And then it'll do a commit at the end. And usually it uploads a bunch of parts, and then it will do a whole series of commits together.
That's cool because I think it's fair to say we care a lot about S3A.
Yeah. What would be useful? Going beyond just dumping stuff into an Etherpad, on my behalf. Are there things that I could do around tracker issues or something, or trying to better articulate individual tasks or something here that would be beneficial? I'm probably not going to be writing the C++ code. So if there's something that I can do here, then I'm happy to.
I think we can just start using our Ceph backlog Trello and create separate cards.
Okay.
Here's a link to it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, I'm arriving late here, but it's not obvious to me to like what the specific things are that should be done and how they all fit together. I can imagine.
We talked about a bunch of different ones here, so maybe Kyle can kind of summarize and break them into things in Trello.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like maybe making sure that the EC parameters translate into proper hints for like BlueStore, checksum unit sizes or something like that. Like those sorts of things would be. But
yeah. Right. And even some of the stuff I was thinking, like with BlueStore, is for particular pools. And I guess we kind of have this functionality right now, but it's kind of mixed. It is where you're able to like perhaps record perhaps still have checksums on BlueStore so that you can use them for scrubs, but that they're disabled, but only on a particular pool basis for verifying on read. And I think it seemed like that should be supported, but when we were playing with it, I think it turned out to. It was like you can turn off when you created the pool, but you couldn't like turn off reading. You couldn't turn off checksum on read if there was already existing checksums or something.
Yeah, I mean they aren't overlapping with the erasure coding, so we need them even when erasure coded.
Yep.
They don't handle the erasure code assumes that the checksums are correct and correctly enforced.
Mhm.
But yeah, making sure like the chunk sizes line up is something that
You
definitely
can still turn off the checksuming on the read though. We don't have to have that always on in the read path, right? You could just reserve them on write and read them during scrub.
Because some applications are gonna do its own checksum validation and read of checksums that are inside of the actual object. So it's not necessarily useful to be doing that in two places. It's just additional overhead. But you still want to have the checksums there so that you can use them for scrub and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that would take some modification to the way scrub works, because right now it just literally reads the objects and for BlueStore relies on its checksumming behavior to match to verify that internal consistency.
anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean we want that, but I get. So what you're saying?
I'm saying if we have this option, we need to modify BlueStore to be able to do scrubbing properly.
So that you're able to have checksum on scrub, no checksum on client read,
Right.
So it differentiates between a background and a client read for whether or not to checksum or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. All right.
It just sounds like
that
was
was
it.
all for what I had. Yeah, we can move on.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Good. Thanks.
Yes, next topic was around build and test optimizations. I think there's kind of two topics here. The first part is around kind of optimizing machine time and how we're using the lab for tests, and I think we're gonna do a summer project around analyzing some of this. I wanted to kind of brainstorm which kinds of things we should be looking at in this process. Looks like a bunch of folks have already added some ideas to the Etherpad here. Start do this. There's a few different categories of things. One aspect is looking at the actual execution of the tests and improving how those are executed. Another aspect is looking at the coverage in the suites and seeing how much of that is historically been most useful versus what always kind of fails at the same time, or it doesn't cover the same kinds of code paths or different code paths from each other. There's some notes here about improving parallelism in some aspects of this. You can also consider some higher level improvements in how the tests are run. Like some portion of the test always involves setting up, imaging a node, and installing all the packages. Even with Ceph ADM, we're installing all the packages so that we can run all the client-side tests. So if we were able to run all the client workloads within the containers as well, and get rid of that step. And we could potentially be bundling tests together more too, to avoid the installation and reimaging overhead for each individual test. We already had some improvements ongoing here around decreasing the amount of logs we're collecting. I think that Jason just had a PR today to do that for all the non-radio suites, reducing the BlueStore log levels. So we collect them in memory, but don't write them to disk, and therefore don't need to save like a terabyte of logs every time we run accumulating express tests. So that's a huge improvement.
This is just collect using the 1/20 option so that we
Yeah,
it
exactly.
wouldn't crash. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we still have the regular debug 20 in the radio suite so that we have the full details.
Yeah. Yep. Under this long poll job runtime, the thing that C-test does with the unit test is it remembers what the runtime is, and so that the next time you run it, it always runs the longest running ones first. I wonder if Tethology could do something similar.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it'd be worth looking at if we could reduce that long poll runtime because there's only say a few tests in the first place before trying to just run them first.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's that huge Ansible task that runs at the beginning. It still takes like a long time.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly. That's not part of
like
the 15 minutes of like epi test or something.
Yeah, and a good chunk of that is added user accounts.
Oh, really?
Exactly. Yep.
But can we not just have like a standard like IPA server somewhere that they just say like, hey, get all your creds from the server over here, so we don't need to.
Yeah. Or yeah, and all the package installs. I don't know if they could be applied to like the fog image. Like maybe nightly we for each of our fog targets or whatever, we just like rerun Ansible, and so we have a freshly to date. That way you could just image it with something that's already ready to go.
One thing that can be useful is if we could time each task, how much task each task is taking.
We actually have
that would be the
already.
easiest way.
There's a time that YAML that's part of every the results of directory of every job. It has the time each task took. So that part of this project could be the summary going through and analyzing historically what if we see large patterns there.
Yep, that'll be really useful.
Yeah, we had that. We've been collecting that data for a long time, but I don't think we've really done much with it in a while.
Yeah. Yep. It would be really nice to have the thing where Tethology, you can schedule a job before the build is done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't you want to go into all the Tethology improvements? We've talked about those a few times already.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things we can improve there.
Yeah. Okay.
I was wondering as well about the. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I was just thinking with our dead job issues and stuff now almost resolved, should we just reduce our timeout for pathology jobs from 12 hours to like something like 6, 7, or like start with something?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
I've never seen one go longer than that.
So with the coverage piece, I think Sam was talking to you a little bit about this before, trying to look at the historical facets that had failed together or not, to see if they were kind of highly correlated versus or not, and whether they if they weren't covering like different really different code paths, was worth removing them or maybe combining them into a single task or something like that.
Yeah, I think cutting down the number of tests is ultimately the most promising way to reduce the length of the radio suite. It's just long. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
A lot of tests.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a way to like programmatically do it, that would be nice because it's too big to keep in your head and really understand what you're doing.
The subset thing worked for a while, but it's gotten too big now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I always have like over 10,000.
Yeah, the minimal radio suite is like 350 jobs now, so it's
it's just too many.
I mean, you could imagine too, if you understand the correlations, then you could like have all the jobs that you start be uncorrelated, and so you have sort of a fast fail
Precisely.
behavior or something, and then and then if you have the job automatically cancel as soon as it hits.
So that I think would be an interesting project. We have a
Yeah.
decent backlog of data for it, even.
Yeah.
Of sorts.
Yeah. Yep. Is the Sentry, not the Sentry, the Paddles database, is it get pruned, or does that go back all the
I'm
way?
not sure actually. I think it goes back pretty far because I think I've seen links to it that go back to like several years.
Cool.
We
Yeah,
could
I
also mark facets non-essential. The way the subset code works is it ensures that every facet option shows up at least once, along with a few other constraints. So if we could mark some of those facets non-essential, then that would probably cut us down by a substantial factor for the thrashing suite, for instance. But it would still be nice to have data for which one is, or for which facets are least useful.
Mm-hmm. We could also make more use of the turning a facet from a multi a product into a single item, where we randomly choose one within that directory, regardless of which subset you're running. We just added that for the object store in the dashboard suite, for example.
Yeah. Yep.
How does that actually help?
It means that it's not included in the product matrix. It's as if each directory is only one thing instead of like 3 things, for example. So it reduces the minimum kind of number of jobs you need to run for a suite. Another aspect of this that and Jason brought up before was trying to look at how much machine time we're using for different suites. And that kind of leads into the build CI discussion. As if we're running like tons and tons of radio suites all the time, using up tons of machine time, it might make sense to try to do more batching together of things if we can to
Yeah, that's hard.
more focus on optimizing those kinds of suites that we run less frequently.
Yeah.
So, but moving on to the build CI parts, Sunny's already been working on like automating the workflow of creating a batch of a branch and running it through Pathology with GitHub Actions. I think that'll be a big step towards being able to have this whole pipeline more automated and more efficient. Might be that we can't use very large batches to start with, but maybe as we kind of stabilize the test suites more and reduce the kind of false positive rates, we can get to being able to run large batches with higher probabilities of success.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of this is in terms of the development speed, so the latency to be able to run a test, just being able to get packages out of the build system as quickly as possible, or even for a local build, speeding that up. I think there's a bunch of different things that you could do there. And I'm not too familiar with all of them myself, but I think you've been running with like Ninja for as a build tool for some time. What's your experience like with that? Are you there, Kifu?
Sorry, I missed your question.
I was wondering, I think you've used Ninja for a build tool for some time. What's been your experience with it?
With what?
With a Ninja?
Ninja, okay. Actually, I've been using for 1.5 years, so I cannot really tell the difference between Make and Ninja, so, because I'm not using Make anymore.
Did it speed things up when you switched over originally?
But when I was switching from Make to Ninja, I was reading some posts over the internet, which notes that the Make is the GNU Make has been doing a lot of check and runtime dependencies analysis. So in theory, Ninja is much faster because what it do is just run the job. It's just a batching tool. So it is much faster. Also, according to the website of Ninja, it's claimed that it is much faster than Make. I think that's why I switch over to Make and never turned back. Sorry, I switched over to Ninja and never turned back.
Are there any downsides? Like, is there any reason not to enable it in the build?
No. I think it's a Pendex replacement of GNU Make.
Okay, that sounds pretty promising then if it's just a drop-in replacement.
I should do some testing just to see.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the biggest build improvements are going to be from like restructuring some of the source code, though, so that our headers are smaller and there are fewer included and so on. That's like hard work.
Yep, for sure. There's another concept of Unity builds where you try to batch things that batch source code and headers files together much more to avoid recompiling over and over again. Exactly. And that's kind of what you're describing. It's a ton of work to make sure that's correct. There is an option to CMake to just try to do that automatically. You just have to watch out for kind of symbols that alias each other that wouldn't have been a problem before.
All right. Yeah.
So that could be another thing that we could try out and see if everything breaks and how hard it is to fix. And how much speed up there is.
Yeah.
I think Deepika had another idea about trying to do more like pre-built sub-modules like we do for Boost, or for I think the Debian builds at least, or just using a pre-built tarball of that instead of having to recompile it every single build. So a lot of the sub-modules we don't really change that often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice if there was like a way to automate that so that it would just like cache the build artifact for a given
SHA-1 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there are all these things like distcc that I worry that, I mean, the few times that I've tried distcc, the like wins were sort of hidden, obscured by the overhead of like shipping all the data back and forth over the network.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder. I don't know.
I mean, disks and networks are a lot faster these days.
Yeah,
maybe that would
exactly,
be more feasible.
Yeah, CPUs are the slow part, so yeah.
I mean, we've been successful with it in the past. I think the issue we ran into was just that the overall utilization rose, so it wasn't helpful for people individually anymore. This was back when we had like 6 workstations in a rack that the developers were just sharing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means it would work really well in a CI environment or not, but And I think Ccache will probably be more relevant than trying to distribute it actually, because we have much of build happening in parallel anyway. But
Yeah. Well, it feels like there's like a lot for somebody to do here. Intern can.
Yeah, for sure. Greenhouse have started this pad for about as a kind of gathering place for ideas that maybe could be intern projects or a small experimental projects at first anyway, and some larger ones.
I suspect there's like a whole like the thing I struggle with the most is there's a whole set of tools for doing the backports and managing all the tracker issues and like generating the backport pull requests or whatever. But it's like a bunch of scripts that like run against a Redmine API, and I think unless you're familiar with them, if I'm doing a backport manually, then it's never clear like how to interact with that.
Hmm.
I wonder if there's opportunity to like, maybe it's just I have to learn. We do train other developers to make use of the tools properly, or if there's a way to integrate it with like GitHub Actions or I don't know, something to like streamline that workflow.
Yeah, we could potentially try to automate some of that, like for NEPRs that don't have conflicts in backports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's some good documentation about those scripts in the stable releases wiki. They also try to make them a bit easier to use.
Because it's always like I'm gonna I know I need to backport something, and so I like merge it, and then I go and create the backport pull request. But then it's just there's no tracker issue that it matches to. It's whatever. It's just like it doesn't.
Yeah, if you don't have things set up in the right workload, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yep.
I did see there's a backport bot that got created. I don't know who added it, but that essentially,
Patrick did. He's running using the scripts.
yeah. So is it being triggered manually or?
I think it's automated. I'm not sure by what. Just like running every hour or every day or what, but.
Yeah, because I mean, I had the same issues that it was saying, but at some point, I think Nathan shared some documentation or wrote some documentation about this, which was super clear. But the only thing is they're two separate scripts, and you need that initial setup that you need to do with Redmine and SSH keys and all that kind of stuff. But you still have the issue of running two separate scripts. So maybe eliminating one script and having that backport bot just do something automatically. Something is merged pending backport, you immediately create those trackers. That would help a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So like the GitHub. Yeah. If as soon as you merge it, the action just like does it. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And if you mention the backport bug in the new pull request, then it could also update the tracker to point to it.
Yeah.
We call that. Yeah. So you're not cut and pasting pull requests and bug numbers all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be really cool.
I think we can also read through the comments. Like we generally add the readmine tracker to our commit, and from the commit, using GitHub Actions, we can read the commit messages as well. And using that, it can automatically update the tracker issue that this PR is in progress. So even for master PRs, that would be a huge workload reduction for someone who's reviewing PRs.
Yeah, that's a good point. We could automate like the setting it in progress and then setting it to resolved or pending backport when it merges too.
Okay.
Any other ideas or things you want to talk about around optimizing builds and tests? Workflow in general?
I guess
All right.
the last thing is I noticed that the API tests GitHub action takes forever. I went and I peeked at it, and it was compiling all the code, including the stuff that wasn't needed for the to actually run the tests. I wonder if it's possible to like chain things so that there's like one action that will actually do the build, and then a second one that does makes check based on that artifact, another one that does the dashboard API test based on that artifact or whatever. So they're like,
Yeah, I think Ernesto was looking at that. I forget how far he got. I think that might not have been completely finished, but he already got at least started into investigating how that would be feasible. And it looks like
cool.
it was possible to do it with the existing kinds of Jenkins pipelines.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it was always possible to do with the pipelines. It was the question of, will there be a time savings? There's certainly a cost savings, right? Potentially, like if you're taking like gigabytes of RPMs or whatever, having to then transfer them to another host to then execute the next step in the Jenkins job. It's like does that process of uploading it somewhere to an archive and then pulling it down on the next Jenkins like builder, does that actually even save any time?
Yeah.
But if there is an issue where it's like building too much, then maybe there's something to cut down there, or literally you just run the API test after make check.
Right.
Make check pass great, and now run the API test afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like that the tests themselves aren't very CPU intensive in comparison to the build.
Mm-hmm.
So like almost just like putting the API test inside make check, parallelizing it with everything else might be. But it's nice to have it broken out. I guess, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. Anyway.
Well, the API tests have a lot of extra build requirements on just the make check, but doesn't mean we can't have a meta script that runs them both together in our CI.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got lots of good future project ideas.
Yep.
Let's see what's the next topic here. Telemetry awareness. You want to talk about this?
Sure. So right now, the dashboard has a notification bar that reminds the user to opt in. And once they click that little X on that notification, they're never reminded again to opt in. So I was talking with Ernesto, thinking what would be the right expiration for that cookie that never bothers the user again. And I think at least a point release is upgrade is a good excuse to nag the user again, but that might be too long. So I'm not sure what the sweet spot is between nagging the user and kindly reminding them. So I wonder what you think.
I mean, I think for a major upgrade, that's definitely fair game. Good time. I'm not sure about point releases, just because they happen more frequently. Although it's probably it's like every 2 months, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you're actually seeing in this data is just that a bunch of users hadn't upgraded to a version that had telemetry or hadn't used the dashboard at all, rather than that they'd forgotten about seeing it. Because like,
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what the timelines were, but that was like 2019 was like a year after we had any telemetry at all, and it was only in the newest version, which a lot of people hadn't upgraded to at the time. And if the only way you got to see it to turn on was by running the dashboard, a bunch of our users didn't use the dashboard for a lot of years. I mean, I think a bunch of them still don't. So if you want more awareness, so if we're worried about awareness, I think it's probably more like make sure that it's exposed at all via the CLI.
I'm looking
Yes,
at the. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we thought of having a health warning, but we had some mixed feelings about that as well. So, Greg, would you have any other ideas of how to expose it through the CLI for users who do not use the dashboard?
Maybe just have an extra output when you run Ceph status that says, "Hey, either please opt in or else turn off this warning with one of these commands." It can't be a health warning. But it could be that on a major upgrade, then it's like uses the same flag as the dashboard or a different one that's just like, "Hey, please turn on telemetry by running this command or opt out by running this one."
I have the results from the latest survey here. I don't know. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
So about, what's it, like 4/5 people have it enabled for all or some other clusters. A little over half have it on none of them. And the reasons why they don't are a third of them are just like they haven't gotten around to it yet. And a third say that their cluster like literally doesn't have access to the internet. So you can't do anything about these ones. These ones, like we've been just nagging them and reminding them every time there's a release. A few of them are running old releases, although not as many anymore. But I think a lot of it is just this whole category of responses is all just like fear or like organizational whatever. Like maybe there's a policy that doesn't do it, or maybe I have to get special approval, or kind of hard to address those ones. But anyway, I don't know.
But the
This is
33%
encouraging.
haven't gotten around to it. It's something we can address.
Yeah. Yep.
Was there a category I haven't heard of it before in this survey too, or no?
There was. Oh well, I haven't gotten around to it yet.
The responses, yeah, I think that's probably that 34%.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know about it. Yeah, I forgot to put that in there. You not? A fair number of people have disabled the of the people that disabled it. Interesting. Yeah, most people didn't realize the dashboards are there. So also probably just publicizing the dashboards, make people more aware.
Yeah, we need to probably send to the mailing list or add another blog post. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe you could do a tech talk going through some interesting info in the dashboards.
Yeah.
Have we fixed a bug yet because it was turning up in the wild and moved up our backlog?
Yeah, I was thinking actually
that would be the advertisement is, "Hey, we found out that this was hitting you, and so we fixed it. Please turn on telemetry so we know when this hits you."
Yeah, I was thinking that
definitely have you using it already to like see whether crashes are seen in the wild. So
under part
I
of
come up
the
with some good examples.
maybe part of the scrub like cadence or whatever should be viewing the crash report telemetry dashboard too. Sure that the big issues are mapped. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great if we have examples of how that was actually useful. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, and about the fear that you mentioned, I guess just education would be good, but it goes. I mean, to a certain length. I mean, there will be users that.
I'm really not sure we can do anything about that, except for the actual data sharing contracts we post. Like there's a lot of research around that sociological phenomenon, and it's basically you have to give them a reason that it's good for them, because otherwise they just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, probably collecting the list of bugs we fixed thanks to the telemetry is probably our best argument for it.
Yeah.
We also discussed gathering more performance metrics and stuff so that we can, tune some of the Blue Store settings and things better. Advertising things like saving memory, saving CPU, all that kind of things also will draw people.
It's going to be a bit of a longer term before we can get that out there and start acting on it, though. Like we already advertised that we're fixing some of these bugs that we're seeing in the crashes.
Yeah, that's definitely phase 1, and what I'm talking about is phase 2. I mean, it's not going to happen soon, but.
Yeah, that'll definitely be a good one in the future.
Agreed.
I mean, any other thoughts on this topic? Okay. Let's go on to the Ceph Windows support then.
Hi.
See, is Lucian here?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Your volume's very low.
What about now? Sorry, I just woke up. It's 5 a.m. here.
Oh, wow. Yep. Yeah, it's better if we can hear you. All right.
Should just skip this, or if you guys would like to hear more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's the last pull request that we have. WD support is already in, and we are also having a Windows Jenkins job that's testing the build process, making sure that it still works. So we made some pretty good progress with it. I was hoping to get CephFS in Pacific as well. Patrick said that he'll take a look soon, so we should be done with it pretty soon. Since I'm here, do you guys have any suggestions or questions about Windows, the Windows porting effort?
I guess Patrick isn't on the call. We talked about it briefly this morning in the leads call. And I think generally speaking, everyone is pretty excited about it. But Patrick's concern was around making sure that we have sufficient CI integration. So not just, I guess, build tests and also some testing, I guess, in order to ship stuff. So I don't really know what's on the. I know that like part of the plan is to do like CI integration so that we're actually doing builds, and we can catch regressions on that end. But what about on the testing side? Like,
Yeah,
is the
so
plan to?
we did. Yeah, sure. So we did port some of the Ceph functional and unit tests, mostly around Rados, and that helped us find quite a few bugs when porting the libraries to Windows. And we have plan to expand the test coverage and then automate the testing. At first, we might run it periodically on our environment, but then we might do it for every patch that gets merged in. That's the plan. So yeah, what we do have at the moment. So here's an example. We have MinGW job that's running with the FCI. So here's a log that should give us at least some coverage. Make sure that it still is.
So this, I mean, this just run. This does the actual build.
Yeah, it's just for now. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, is there? I mean, there's the build, there's unit tests. I mean, are we going to have like actual Windows machines that are like running a test suite of some sort?
Yeah, yep. For sure, it's going to be discussed between Cloudbase and some other interesting parties.
Cool.
But even if we don't integrate some Windows nodes into the official CI, we're probably going to do some testing on our own side. It depends on how much hardware we have available.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there some kind of like simple smoke test that we could run on Linux, like with WinGW or Wine or something? Or
Yeah, so I have some test results and even some small scripts that are running the tests on Windows. Yeah, so here are some test results that we have. Those are quite we got early for the porting process, and
yeah, I guess I'm wondering if we could like run some of these kind of basic test cases without a full-fledged like Windows setup.
yeah, sure, that's what we plan to do.
Okay.
So we have those Rados tests that already have been ported, and then we are going to look into RBD and CFFS, which are the main components that we use on Windows at the moment. And I also have those scripts that have aggregated those results and did the test running because we, since we are building on Linux using MGW, we cannot just use CMake for running the tests.
Okay, cool.
Other than that, I saw that people are really eager to use Ceph on Windows. We get plenty of feedback on mail. I mean, which are either contacting us directly or through the Ceph channels. So that's a good thing.
That's good to hear.
We already have some beta builds which are updated daily. I can paste the link here in case if anyone is interested. So the only issue with the Windows bits is that it's much easier to install them with using an MSI installer. So I'm not sure if we'll eventually get that code, the MSI code, and it also has to be signed, which at the moment we, as in Cloudbase, are doing. But we can upstream it if needed.
Cool. Okay. Is there something that we can do to help streamline and accelerate or move along the process of with the CI work? Like, are you already working with David Galloway to get this stuff integrated, or
Not yet. We have to discuss to see if, if we are going to integrate some Windows nodes with upstream sub CI, or are we going to do it separately? I'm not sure if you have resources enough for this, or if we should add some new hosts, or how this is going to work.
I mean, there's a lot of hardware available.
I
think that's not the problem. It's the knowing what to do with it, and how to integrate things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe it makes sense to set up a call in the next couple weeks or whenever appropriate to map out the next steps there. David's on here, but yeah. I mean, you're mentioning that the CephFS token pull request, the RBD one's already merged, but I mean, as far as the testing and CI stuff, it's mostly the same steps that need to be done.
Yeah.
We have testing for both and producing artifacts and all that stuff.
For CephFS, we while developing this, we're mainly using some third-party drivers, which might be useful, but it also be useful to port existing tests, and then make sure that we actually run it. I'm not sure. For BSD, are you running any tests already, or is it?
I don't know, Jason. Do you know? I don't think so.
You said for RBD, Windows RBD.
Yeah.
No. So for BSD.
Oh, BSD.
Yeah.
Oh. No.
I don't think so.
We don't do it. We don't do anything with BSD. No. If we break it, we get the email in the mail that saying.
Yeah. I think the next step has been for a long time to do a build job that runs Clang instead of. I think that would be the next step. Then whatever, cross compiler, have a BSD host. Yeah. Okay.
That's about it on my side. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you. That's very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for waking up this early. It's not the best time for it.
Yep.
And yeah, too bad Patrick couldn't make it this time.
No problem.
But we'll hopefully see you next time. Any other topics folks wanted to bring up? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
See you next month.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah.